I remember the exact moment I felt my world tilt, as if someone had yanked a rug out from under my feet and left me flailing in midair. It wasn't a yell, a fight, or even a fight cry. It was a text message. The blue bubble on my phone glowed innocently in the dim light of our living room, but the words it carried were lethal. Azza, I need to take a 2-week trip with Mark. I need to find myself. Mark. Her ex. My pulse hit triple digits. I stared at the words as though reading them might give me a clue that this was some elaborate joke, some cruel misfire of her fingers. My wife Aisha, the woman I had trusted with everything, my heart, my home, my quiet Saturday mornings, was planning a trip with a man she had loved before me. And worse, she framed it as a quest for self-discovery, a journey she couldn't take alone. I didn't reply immediately. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I simply read it again, and again, and then slowly, almost absurdly, I typed, "Perfect." I hit send and set the phone down, trembling, because I knew that response didn't mean what she thought it meant. I wasn't agreeing. I wasn't encouraging. I was cataloging a moment I would remember for the rest of my life. I was collecting proof of betrayal in the most passive way possible. 2 days later, she was gone. She left in a whirlwind of suitcases, perfume, and excuses that sounded rehearsed even to me. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed, like our marriage was a book she could pick up later. And I, for some reason, let her go. I let her believe I had no idea what she was doing. At first, I tried to convince myself it was really just about self-discovery. Maybe she really needed a break. Maybe this trip with her ex was innocent. I replayed every memory we had. The late-night talks, the quiet mornings with tea, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes, and tried to convince myself that people didn't just leave for 2 weeks with their ex to find themselves. But deep down I knew. Deep down I could feel it gnawing at the edges of my chest, a relentless whisper. She's lying. Kept myself busy. I went to work, I jogged at dawn. I immersed myself in tasks I had neglected. I didn't want to think. But nights were the worst. I would lie in our bed, now strangely empty on her side, and imagine the two of them together. Laughing, touching, sharing memories I wasn't allowed to revisit. I hated myself for the visions, and hated her even more for giving me reasons to have them. 1 week into her self-discovery, I noticed subtle things that made my blood run cold. Mark's name popped up in strange contexts. On mutual friends' social media posts, in Aisha's sudden flurry of vacation photos that were too perfectly staged. Beaches, face, sunsets. Each snapshot looked carefully curated, as if she wanted me to see them without really showing anything. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized she wasn't trying to hide anything. Not really. She was flaunting it. I almost broke down. I almost called her. But instead I did something that surprised even me. I booked a flight to the city where she was staying. 2 days later I was there. Not as her husband, not as a victim, not as a man in pain, but as a silent observer. I wanted to see the truth for myself, not through the filtered lens of my imagination. I found the small boutique hotel she had posted a photo of on Instagram. I checked in under an alias, claiming to be a freelance photographer looking for inspiration. That afternoon, I wandered down the street she had mentioned in her posts. And there she was, laughing, smiling, her hand casually brushing against Mark's arm as they strolled through a crowded outdoor market. My chest tightened so sharply I couldn't breathe. It was real. It wasn't in my imagination. She wasn't finding herself. She was revisiting an old flame. I watched from across the street, every laugh, every glance, every shared joke ripping me apart from the inside out. And then it hit me. I didn't just feel hurt. I felt invisible. A ghost in my own marriage, replaced by someone she had loved before. That night, I sat in my hotel room staring at my reflection in the window, the city lights flickering over my face like a harsh spotlight. I thought about the years we had spent together, the trust one had given her blindly, and the way she had shattered it with the simplicity of a text. And I realized something. Anger was useless. Hurt was useless. Only clarity mattered. I needed to see how far this went. The next morning I found out. I saw her and Mark at a small beachside cafe, their hands intertwined over a shared plate of fruit. They were so absorbed in each other they didn't notice me sitting on a bench across the street, sipping coffee I couldn't taste. Every moment felt like a hammer to my heart. And yet I stayed. I watched them for hours, cataloging every gesture, every smile, every betrayal, because I couldn't leave without knowing everything. By the time she returned home 2 weeks later, I had rehearsed every word I would say. But when she walked through the door, suitcase in hand, eyes bright and cheerful like nothing had happened, all my rehearsed lines evaporated. I looked at her, and the only words that came out were calm, quiet, devastating. "We're done." Her smile faltered. She opened her mouth, probably to launch into excuses or justifications, but I held up a hand. "Mo." I didn't want to hear it. Not today. Not ever. I turned to the closet, started packing my own things, not out of retreat but as a statement. The life we had built together was over, and I wasn't going to stand by and watch her erase it like it meant nothing. She tried to argue. She tried to cry. She tried to tell me it was complicated, that she needed to understand herself. I let her talk. I let her unravel in front of me while I remained still, silent, controlled. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Not the betrayal, not the heartbreak, but the restraint. I had loved her once, deeply, and now I had to love myself enough to walk away. When she finally stopped, exhausted from her performance of guilt and confusion, I looked at her one last time. There was no anger in my voice, no dramatic shouting, no imploring. Just the cold, undeniable truth. You've made your choice. And now I'm making mine. I left that night, taking only what belonged to me. The apartment we had shared, the memories, the future we had planned. All of it was hers to bear alone. And as I drove away, the city lights disappearing behind me, I felt something strange and new. A sense of freedom. Not happiness. Not relief. Just clarity. Weeks later, I learned that Mark had quietly returned home, leaving Aisha alone with her regrets and the illusion of a life she thought she could have. Social media showed me nothing of their private moments, but I didn't need to know. I had already seen enough to understand the truth. I won't lie. There are nights when I still think of her, when I imagine what might have been if trust hadn't shattered so easily. But I also know this. Betrayal doesn't just end a marriage. It reveals who we are, who we were, and, most importantly, who we can become when the illusion falls away. 2 years have passed now. I live in a smaller apartment, quieter, simpler, but mine. I've rebuilt my life with the lessons of heartbreak etched deep into my bones. Trust is harder to give, yes, but I give it where it matters, carefully, deliberately. And sometimes, when the night is silent and the city hums softly around me, I remember the text, the 2-week trip, and the calm words I sent in response. Perfect. Because in that moment, I realized something profound. Perfection isn't about agreeing with betrayal. Perfection is recognizing it, owning your own truth, and refusing to be a ghost in your own life. And in that, I finally found myself.